Hello, everyone. Dr. Ames here. What I'd like to talk about this time is the market environment, specifically segmentation, targeting, and positioning. In other words, STP marketing. So let's just get right into it. Here's the learning objectives for this time. By the time we're all done, you ought to be able to explain the process of STP marketing, uh, understand and describe those bases for identifying target segments, discuss the criteria that you use in doing so, um, identify the essentials of a positioning strategy and understand what positioning really is, and then review those ingredients that you need to really put over the brand's value proposition. So STP marketing is really developing a strategy. And like I've said, it's about segmenting and it's about targeting and it's about positioning. And generally, this is the mix of elements that you're going to need to be successful with your promotions. So you start with a very large audience group, like we talked about in the past. And you're going to use this sort of marketing when you have those large markets that need to be broken down um, into those smaller groups where you can find those customers who have similar needs and preferences and so forth. So there are so many different subgroups out there available. Um, and depending on what your product or service is, you could be dealing with the members of various audience groups. Most of the time, of course, our promotional mix is directed at household consumers, which is the largest audience group out there and so forth. So what we want to do, let's just speak to that segment in general. We want to identify our target segment, and that target segment is really our customers. And so who are our customers? Um, they're a subset, a smaller group of that larger market that's out there. So let's just assume that consumers are going to be the majority of where we're going to find our market. So we need just to find that smaller slice that makes sense that we can market to, that we can solve their needs and wants indeed. So once we've identified that subgroup, then we certainly have to position our message in some way. So we present our product or our service in a way that creates a mental image in the mind of our potential consumers. And so we want it, of course, to be a valuable message that is in their minds, one that is very unique, distinct to us, and one, of course, that places value on the relationship with us and that consumer. The idea that they might like our product or service and they might be a future customer for us and have that potential. So we use a positioning strategy, of course, to say, how are we going to set this message out there? In other words, there will be a theme or a concept that runs through our message. And that is what the organization is going to feature, those themes, those messages and concepts. And so will probably use with STP marketing a variety of different mediums, but the message themes and the concepts will remain pretty consistent across these different channels. And so every time we reach consumers, we're being consistent with our value offering and our brand message. And so that's really what we want to do. If we want to make ourselves unique and distinct in the minds of consumers and create a distinctiveness for that target segment, then we've got to tell them what we can do for them and let them know, well, where do we stand? And so that's what a successful marketing strategy will be consisting of. And certainly it's not static. Once we come up with our ideas and start a campaign, a promotional campaign, we're going to have to revise it and modify it as we go, maybe even reinvent it as we find out new information and so forth. So there are different ways to identify our market segment. So we start with a large group again, and we're trying to find different ways to narrow it down. So there are different tools that we can use, different lenses that we can apply to really narrow our perspective and find out who are we really selling to and who will we be most successful in selling to. So that is what market segmentation is, the breaking down of that large heterogeneous market. Heterogeneous meaning it's very diverse. There are lots of different elements. And we want to find those markets within that big diverse mix that are more homogeneous in nature, where the consumers within those smaller segments have similar wants and needs that we can solve. And so they become our target segments and our submarkets that we're really looking for. We have to narrow it down. We want to be specific if we want our messages to be successful. And so one way to do that is by looking at usage and commitment. And so certainly one way to look at commitment and usage is who are the heavy users of our product or service? This is a common submarket that's often targeted by pretty much any organization that's got a marketing plan. The first thing they're going to want to do is, well, who is buying the product right now? And what is that submarket? And who are the best customers in that market, and so forth. And so these heavy users, we found out over time, do account for the great majority of product sales. So we can segment that larger audience group, that larger heterogeneous market, and really delineate it down into smaller pieces. So you segment by usage. Non-users are the lowest level that we might be able to reach. People who don't use the product or service at all right now would be the hardest to convert or to actually stimulate enough to take some action. Brand loyal users, on the other hand, are that asset if they're your product users. So it may be that you're after some brand users, but they don't use your brand. They're using the competitors. And so those are a challenge to convert because brand loyalty is often fairly strong. And that's what you're seeking to develop in your own consumers. And so you're trying to overcome that same brand loyalty amongst the consumers who use your competitors' products. So we also have switchers or variety seekers, as you can see here. These are consumers are a little different. They're motivated by sales and special offers, price incentives of all types. They are difficult to convert to that category of heavy users, for instance, simply because they're always looking for sale. They're always looking for a better deal. And so they are going to shop around. And so they may be resistant to building really strong brand loyalty with any particular product, just depending on who they are and so forth, because we're going to, see that individual differences do matter when we're trying to understand consumers. And brand loyal users are the same thing. Maybe they're not quite as heavy as the heaviest users, but they are such a challenge. And certainly people who switch or are looking for variety or something new or a better deal are simply not often going to become your heavy users unless you can really wow them and win them over. And then, of course, we have these emergent consumers. These are consumers who may have used the brand or the service before, but not frequently. And they haven't decided yet on what brand they like the most. And so they are emerging as potential brand loyal customers for you and potential heavy users if you can persuade them to have that level of like and usage and loyalty to your brand. And so these are your first time buyers or users, and you're trying to really convert them in particular to using your brand. And so this is called point of entry marketing, where you get a new person to join a new market for the first time and become a loyal user of some product or service. Well, we can also segment by demographics. Now, demographics is such a wide open topic. It includes statistics and knowledge with numbers in all types of categories. And so it divides up that heterogeneous market, say of the household consumers audience. And we can look at them through their age, or we can look at them by gender, race, marital status, income, education, and occupation, and so forth. So these facts allow us to really drill down and say with a little more certainty, that is the exact group of consumers that we want to send our message to, that we want to target. So these demographics are just used to further winnow down that process, break down the segment into smaller and smaller parts, get them into the smallest possible submarket that we can identify. And so heavy users is one, but maybe we could identify those heavy users within that group by age or income. And then we have a little bit more knowledge to shape our message and so forth, because age and income do matter. Heavy users is one thing, but how old they are and what type of income and standard of living they have also matters. And so we can factor all of those factors in and have a much more successful message by combining all the tools and all this information. As well, we can segment by geography. Now, generally, you're going to do this within your own country. You can segment the whole world, of course, if you wanted to, but you've got to do something that's manageable and workable. And so generally, your geographic segmentation is going to be done within your home country. And you've got to accept the fact that people act differently in most places around the world and in different countries that have a variety of regions. We find that people have different tastes and preferences, different likes and desires. And so that general influence of geography, climate as well, really does dictate the sort of foods that people prefer, what they eat, the type of things they like to do in their spare time for recreation, the sorts of things they do when they travel, where they go, what sorts of things do they do, what sorts of activities, what sorts of entertainment do they enjoy, and so forth. And certainly we all know that this varies around the country and in general, a lot of ways by region. Now, certainly not everybody in any region is going to be exactly the same, but we can find these general trends and preferences. And therefore, if we could break it down even further, age, income, and gender, and other factors, then we could really start to craft the message that we want through this STP marketing that really helps us be effective when we're trying to reach people with our message. And then we have this geo-demographic segmentation. This is segmentation of the market that gets down even further. We've gone beyond national geography and regional, and we're saying, let's find out about certain neighborhoods. And what is an easy way to do that? Well, certainly using a zip code would be one major tool that marketers have latched onto and developed over time. So we've got the Claritas.com company. They have developed this system called Prism. And this Prism system is a marketing segmentation tool that uses zip codes. And so what they do is they examine a lot of different demographic factors in any given zip codes. And then they write up a report about it. They identify lifestyles, preferences, income, and mix it all together and give you a terrific profile of what the people are like who live in any given zip code. And what you might find is one or two of these categories of people, or you might find a half a dozen or more in a real complex area. And so this is just another tool that marketers have developed over time, taking geographic demographic segmentation and turning it into geo-demographic segmentation. And it gives us a greater depth to be able to drill down, as we say in database language, to get increasing detail. Now we can also look at other things that aren't quite as tangible, things like lifestyle, things that we call psychographics, which are attitudes, values, beliefs, and so forth. Now these are not as easy to identify and so forth, but this is that form of market research that tries to understand consumers and what's going on in their minds. And so this is usually used to support the other information we have about gender and age, income, and those education, those sorts of things. And then we find out different lifestyles that people in those categories with enough money of a certain age, of a certain gender, do these different things. And that tells us lifestyle. Well, if we know these things, then we get an even greater picture, again, of what the consumer is like, and it allows us to determine, are we finding the exact people that our product and service is going to give the most value to, that's actually going to solve a want and need for? And so, like it says here, the goal of all of this is to create these messages that connect with a very specific target segment of consumers. And again, we're going to connect with them in many different medias, channels across the board, such as the many different forms of advertising, the many different forms of mass mediated communication, and the messages won't be identical. They could be in similar circumstances, but they will mainly be consistent, and they will have the same message and so forth. So we can also segment by letting people know what they're going to get out of our product or service, the benefits. So we segment by benefits. We identify the various things that our product or service will do, and then we find those consumers who need that. And it's as simple as that. For instance, the fast food industry has a lot of diverse sub-markets. And so they all expect, though, no matter which sub-market they're in their desire for fast food, and we know there are so many different types, um, they do expect a certain amount of service, a certain level of quality and expense in this industry. And so we can say that we could advertise to consumers um, who like fast food without having to break it down all the way, although certainly when we show our product, it's going to show what category of fast food, but it could appeal because of common benefits across the board in that industry. For instance, what do consumers in the fast food market really look for? They look for speed. They look for quality to a certain level. They look for value, which brings in the idea of price and so forth. And they look for a little bit of variety. So people like burgers and they like pizza and they like Chinese food and Mexican food and a variety of everything else, sandwiches and so forth. And so, but that's a discussion that's for a different, wider topic. In other words, we want to tell people what we could do for them. What are the benefits and so forth. So if we can say that we've got a product or service in the fast food industry, certainly somewhere along the line, we need to mention that we're fast and we have good quality and that we're good value and so forth. And so as a marketer, we will pick these benefits and we will turn them into a consistent theme. And then we will use those themes in our message to try and reach consumers and engage them and get them to want to and desire to use our product and so forth. Um, Now we can also not always want to be selling to that household consumer audience category, which is the largest. We might also want to segment our market to, we're trying to reach people who buy business products. That means people who work at companies who purchase products as a part of their job for use in that company to either convert into other products or use themselves. Um, and so you're appealing to a slightly different audience here when you're looking at business buyers. You are certainly looking at some real demographics here to help you find out, well, what are the companies I'm looking for? What are the industries that would want our product or service? So you would look at reports and information that you could find on usage rates and narrow that down into geographic regions and so forth, and really start to work up a promotion and figure out where it needs to be done and who you're trying to reach helps you so much in delineating that message. So you're probably not going to use the psychographic segmentation. Trying to understand the values, attitudes, and lifestyles is not where it's not going to help you sell a product to a business buyer. It will work with household consumers because you need to know that information in order to sell them the wide variety of consumer products. But business buyers need products used in industry. They need products used in the act of doing business itself and so forth. So what they want is they want reliability. They want a good partner to work with in their supply chain. They want a good value. They want timeliness, quality, all of those things that any business would want working with another business. And you could certainly reach those people in those corporations and organizations through mass mediated messages and communications on television, on radio, and so forth, because the audience category is large enough out there that they are parts of that household consumer market as well. And so you can reach them through a lot of these same media channels. So, but you have to remember what your message is about. And certainly immediately many consumers will use their selective perception and block out the message because, well, they don't need that stuff. But you will reach a lot of people this way. And how do you find out businesses and industries? Well, you can use a lot of governmental sources like this one here, the Standard Industrial Classification, the SIC. This is from the Census Bureau. They've taken all the industries that there are, and they've given them all numbers and divided them up by what they do and so forth. It's very helpful. You can run Google searches on information to segment and find this stuff. You can also use the US Bureau of Labor Statistics and all sorts of other free information that's out there. Information that resides in databases. So really the question has always been for marketers is what's the best? Big segments, small segments. Today, it seems like we started with mass messages, a larger shotgun type of approach, mass mediated messages that were consistent, but a lot of the energy and impetus is wasted on a lot of consumers who are not interested in those messages. So just having the big segment and sending out your message to them is not necessarily a winning strategy. And particularly today, as there is much more clutter in the advertising messages that are bombarding all your potential consumers, we have seen a trend in the last 15 years in particular to smaller and smaller segments, and a trend where all of us as marketers are trying to find a market niche. Now, a market niche is a smaller group of consumers, a smaller segment of your larger heterogeneous, diverse segment that's out there of whatever audience category, and it's a small one who have similar unique needs and wants, and they're also willing to maybe, in many cases, when you find a smaller group, if they can find the highest unique quality they want and the service or whatever it is that is driving their desire to have this, then they'll pay more. They'll pay that premium price. And that premium price will meet their needs and it will not interfere with you making a sale. So particularly in those industries and for those products and services that cost a little more, that make consumers shop around a little bit more and do a little bit more comparison, what you're doing is you're competing with other firms selling like products, trying to find that same small niche that might be very lucrative if you can identify it and get the proper message to them in the right way. So bigger segments do have many diverse submarkets, and you may reach some by sending your message out to the bigger markets, but it may not be as effective. If you can really spend the time and have some luck, some success using modern tools, you can identify smaller niche segments who have the needs and interests that you can fulfill, and indeed that you could create a value proposition for. That's what the consumer is looking for. So when we've identified the segment, we've segmented the market, we've started to make our plan to target it. Part of that targeting is how do we position ourselves? A positioning strategy is exactly that. It means how are we saying what we are, how we can deliver? Are we saying we have the best quality? Are we claiming to have the lowest price? Are we saying that we have the best service? Are we saying that we have the best guarantee or warranty? What is it? How are we positioning ourselves? Are we saying people like us the most? Are we positioning ourselves that we're the best because scientific data says so? Are we saying we're the best because consumers buy more of our product than any other and we can prove it and here's a chart? There's all kinds of ways that we can position ourselves. The trick and the real challenge is to say, what is our message? What is it that's going to resonate with that smaller target segment that we spent so much time trying to identify? And then once we've done it and we've positioned ourselves and we've let them know what we stand for, some ads don't really do anything more than saying we stand for family values when you really break it all down. And there are so many ads that just stand for some concept, a vague emotion or something. Well, if they get that message through to you and that resonates with you, then you may get their attention. But when you finally get them to engage, when they either call you, take advantage of a sales promotion offer, get a free sample, buy the product at a reduced rate at a special sale, you better deliver. You better give them the value that you've been promising. And so you need to stay consistent so that their expectations are something that you're actually going to be able to meet. You want to create the expectation, and then you want to make sure that it is one that you can deliver on. So keep it simple, keep it direct, and you've heard the SIS, keep it simple, stupid. Nothing was truer than in the world of marketing. Now, let's talk about some of the themes that we could use for our STP marketing when we're trying to figure out, well, what position are we trying to do? You want to be novel. In other words, you want to have some creativity. If you notice a lot of ads on mass mediated communication today, like television in particular, some of them, I honestly, I'm no different than any other consumer. I might have to see them 2 or 3 times to understand what the product is, because I'm laughing. They've got me with the humor of it, or they've got me with the absurdity of it. There are so many commercials out there that they show you some scenario that lasts 20 or 30 seconds and it makes no sense at all. It is completely nonsensical in the real world we live in. And yet there it is, and it's got your attention. That's creativity, that's novelty. Does it work? It really depends. At the end of it all, are they stressing a message that you've received that has something to do with the value they're trying to create in that message, their positioning theme? So you want to not mess it up by having too many themes. Oh, we're not only the lowest price, but hey, we have the best service if you come in to see us too, and we have a great guarantee. Well, you don't want to clutter up your message. Maybe all of that is true, but why don't you pick one message and run one promotional campaign with that theme running through it, and let it run its course. And if it goes great and it feels like you ought to keep it going, keep it going. And if it feels like we did well, time to kick it into another gear, then you run the second message and so forth. And so keep it simple. And that's a good way to think about positioning themes. That's a good way to think about STP strategy overall. And so, as it says here, a single or primary benefit, avoid sending multiple messages. It does create ambiguity in the mind of the consumer. A consumer doesn't want to spend a lot of time on your message or anybody else's. So keep it simple, keep it direct, keep it consistent. And if you're going to do a lot of messages, and if you do that, you will get through, because even if they don't like your product or don't want to listen, it's gotten in. Many of us can recite jingles and taglines from products we don't care about at all and we have no interest in. So there are many ways to do it. Benefits, like I've discussed, is a great way to go. There are functional benefits. Will it do the job for you? That creates value. Consumers want to buy a product that does something for them in most cases. Well, does it do that? That's a functional benefit. If it's a toaster, does it toast? And does it do some other things? Well, there are other auxiliary benefits. Tell them all those functional and auxiliary benefits. And then the emotional ones. Oh, we have the best design. And, or if you have this, if you drive this automobile, then people will look as you drive by. And so BMW and other cars like that. There are emotional benefits attached to various products and services. And so maybe it's not that. Maybe you could somehow link that you are donating money to some important cause to save the world, to save elephants, to save the ocean, to save the climate for our grandchildren. Well, if you can link your product or your service to the emotional feeling of the generation of the work ethic to follow that idea and save the world, then you've created an emotional connection. And that is a positioning theme, but it's also setting yourself up to benefit consumers that help us, we help the world. And then, of course, like I've talked about with the BMW and so forth, really one big part of emotional benefits is this notion of the self-expressive benefits. I can express myself. I can wear Nike shoes and I can have Nike logos on my clothes. And so Nike stands for certain things within the mind of certain consumers. And so you would be projecting that status, that prestige, that whatever it is about that's attached to that brand. And that is the self-expressive benefit. It is the social display value. So it's all kinds of things: prestige, pride, status, all of those sorts of things. Now, we can position ourselves competitively. We can compare ourselves to other products in tightly contested markets. We see this happen all the time. It may not be the only type of advertising or campaigns, promotional campaigns you see organizations do, but you will see them revolve through like Pepsi Coke. They're not always competing with each other in their ads, but every once in a while, they will each start running some of those. So that's competitive positioning. Or you start talking about how your aspirin product works so much better in clinical trials than the others for certain specific types of pain, and so forth. Competitive position. And so sometimes you're a brand new brand Maybe you're a brand new food brand. And so how are you going to compete with giant brands? Well, you got to find a way. You've got a way to say, well, all the people that have used our product say they like it 100% better than the best, whatever that you think that people think is the best in the minds of consumers. That's also competitive position. Um, and so the people who use your products, of course, you're going to position by users, who is going to use the product or service and so forth. That's going to, in fact, be somewhat of a larger segment that you're going to want to break down even more if you think about it. Who are the users? And then you're going to want to say, well, who are they by age and income and education and gender, if that matters. And you'll find out when you investigate if it matters or not. And so generally, all of the things I talk about are fair game and they're not exclusive to each other. So you use all the tools in marketing that are available. It's just like management in general. We use all the tools that are out there. Any tool is fair game. We can do whatever we want as long as it's ethical, as long as it's legal, and as long as it doesn't cross those boundaries and do some harm. And I think that has always been one of the founding tenets of the marketing industry as it's grown and developed over time. There was a big emphasis in the beginning on do no harm. I think we maybe don't talk about it as much, but we'll talk about ethics a little bit later on. And certainly do no harm and have no deception is part of that and so forth. So when we talk about these themes, to get myself back on track, is there are ways to let the consumer know, where do we stand? Are we with you? Are you one of us, in other words? And that's really what we're trying to create. So hybrids of all the tools, benefits, users, heavy users, geography, regional differences, all of these things do matter. And ever so often, we do get to a point where we find that we feel stale, that maybe our market growth is flattened out, maybe sales have leveled off, maybe we're maintaining, but we aren't growing and we don't seem to be moving ahead. If your company or organization gets to that point, you could end up doing a marketing campaign that's really, the theme is repositioning. And so you return to STP marketing that you did originally, and you either throw it out completely, or you just come up with a revised strategy that improves on it, that acknowledges weaknesses, says, here's a strength, let's build on it. Here's a weakness, let's throw it out. Let's work around it, and so forth. And you also have to deal with facts of life, that if you're lucky enough as an organization to stick around for a long period of time, that tastes and preferences change over time. They change with generations. For instance, Harley-Davidson motorcycles, incredibly popular with baby boomers. Not as much with the senior generation before baby boomers, their parents, but incredibly popular with baby boomers. When we get to Gen Xers and we get to millennials and certainly Gen Zers, they don't care about Harley-Davidsons. They're not enamored with the sound or the look or the whatever it is that drives that brand loyalty. And so Harley-Davidson, like many brands, is really in a time where they have to reposition themselves and become something different. And they are doing so by moving into the electric bike market and so forth. But certainly their original targeted segment is certainly, it's mainly dying off, quite honestly. And they haven't been able to make that connection with newer generations. So these are reasons why we might have to reposition. Brand loyalties do change. Now, sometimes it's other reasons, like maybe we're not doing such a good job anymore, or maybe the competition's doing a much better job. For instance, look at Domino's Pizza. They went through a whole repositioning just a couple of years ago, where they admitted, the CEO came on television ads and admitted the product was terrible, apologized for how bad it was, said, we'll never be this bad again. We're throwing out everything. We're getting better ingredients, better menus. And they started a series of ads. They repositioned themselves. They're actually, for them, it did succeed. It doesn't always work. It did work. We're seeing something similar today with Subway. They're doing a refresh. If you want very current ads out right now, that's a repositioning theme. They're changing their sandwich menu. They haven't really said it, but the looks of the layout of the store itself, the outlets, looks a little different. So we'll see where they go with that. But that's a repositioning theme. For various reasons, it's time to make a change. So remember, everything I've talked about in STP marketing is about this, providing the value proposition. If you don't do the value proposition, you will fail in the marketplace. You will not gain that customer. You will not gain additional customers, and the competition will beat you. This is what STP market is designed to create, so that you identify your value proposition, that the message is the right one, that you get out about it, and you communicate it properly. So the value proposition itself, it's telling the consumer, here's the functional, the emotional, the self-expressive benefits. Here are all the other benefits that relate to psychographics I talk about, that our brand, our product can deliver, and it's all about value. Well, it's your job as the marketer to make your advertising promotion deliver that value proposition that you say you can deliver. You just have to do it. And so when you're big, it's fairly easy. Budgets are bigger. You have access to all the media channels, and you can hire the best people to do it. But you might, at a certain point, as you grow and develop over time, your product offering might be more complex. It might be much more segmented. And so you made a lot more messages on a lot different levels that all have to remain consistent to what they're trying to do for each of those similar products. So it is all about STP marketing for successful companies at the end of the day. It's about anticipating what consumers want and fulfilling their wants and needs with a real value proposition that they are happy with. So one way to look at this, just to sum it all up, is this scholarly triangle that Thorson and Moore really came together and says, this is how we do it. And this is really what I've been talking about. So you identify and profile that target segment. You understand exactly what you're doing. You segment them, and then you target them. Once you target them, you understand who they are and what they need and want. You craft your value proposition to satisfy that need and want and to fulfill your end of the value proposition. And then it's simple. You decide, where am I going to launch this message? Being consistent, slightly different message in different media channels in different places. So mass mediated television, radio, print advertising, possibilities of direct mail, depends on this, of the promotion of the product and so forth. Okay, folks, that's what I wanted to talk about this time. I'll see you again soon.